Hello everyone, welcome to this next episode of Asturis City in City Skylines. Today we will continue and finish the district where I experiment a little with brutalist architecture. We started this place with a stacked 3-level bridge with a huge building underneath the rail and road entrances to it. In the previous episode, it was expanded with the public transport stations, residential buildings, and lots of details. Today, we move further away from the bridge area. We will continue with some infrastructure, some sort of central commercial area with public transport, and wrap it all up with medium density housing and lots of greenery and other details. Let's go. The common theme for these past couple of episodes is that I don't really have a plan when starting these projects for these episodes. So that was exactly the same with this one. Although with this one it was a little bit easier because I already had some networks defined and they needed to follow some geometry that was already established. So that's exactly the case for the railway. Although the railway is not really going to help me much because it needs to follow the river more or less. So it's going to not really obstruct anything inside this place. So it's just going to somewhat bypass the area. It's going to form some sort of a detail on the edge of it, and I just need to figure out something completely different inside the place, as you can see. So that's exactly what I'm going to do with the trams. Now with the trams I can do pretty much whatever I want because they can follow some more tighter curves and everything, and the grades are not that strict, but still this is the tram line that originates on one of the lower levels in that area from last time, so it cannot really reach all the way to the top because the distance really isn't all that great. So I decided that we are going to do some sort of a sunken area for like a terminus tram stop, which is going to have those reversible tram tracks. So the trams, by the way, we have 2 lines going into this place, these tracks, so that one line is going to stop on the left, other line is going to stop on the right, and the vehicles are just going to reverse and go back and continue back towards the downtown. So it's going to be a sunken area, and it makes sense that it's going to be circular, because why not? We are kind of playing with circles already in this place. The entrances to the bridge are somewhat circular on the sides, and we have those circular buildings as well, and well, that's kind of it. We don't really have other details like that, but all the more reasons to really to experiment with it some more. So this is going to be exactly that. Now I'm going to be using these windows, these kinds of like sawtooth pattern windows, because we already established that. I figured that it might be a good idea to just use similar materials, similar surfaces, and similar colors as we already established in the previously done places to kind of follow with the style and have it a bit more constant in the place, because like I said, I would really like to have this district very unique, and I don't exactly plan on continuing this in other parts of the city because I really just want to have it stand out a little bit more. And this is something that wouldn't really fit the center of the city anyway. I want to have the city a bit more colorful, but these kinds of places on the edges that are just somewhat unique, somewhat different every once in a while definitely won't hurt, right? So here we are. Now, this is something that took me a really long time to build. I was doing this on the live stream, so you could have seen the struggle. So what I'm trying to do here is basically 3, I think there's 3. Yeah, if you count the top level as well, then there are 3 levels, vertical levels in this place. And it's going to form this sort of like an amphitheater shape, maybe. Later it's going to be more emphasized because I'm actually going to cut a hole in one side of it, so it's not going to be this uniform, right? It's going to be actually a little bit unordinary. And I'm just going to create these kinds of entrances down towards it, and these like terraces are going to be reserved for some shops. I'm later going to put those block services into these buildings, so this entire pit area is going to be serving as the main entrance point. But not only that, but it's also going to be the commercial center, and I'm going to put a couple of offices in here, so there's going to be a few jobs. But mostly this place is intended to be some sort of a suburb, I dare say, medium density suburb, basically. It's not really that far away from the city. It's very well connected with the public transport, so it's not that big of a deal. And people don't really need to use the trams. They can just walk some distance towards that train station from last time anyway. So, technically, I built this place with a new technique that I don't think I ever used before, and that's basically using the prop line tools in Prop Anarchy and creating these circles with props. Streetlights, for example, doesn't really matter, some kind of a small object. That I can immediately see the orientation of, so something asymmetrical like a streetlight is perfect. And then I'm going to convert into procedural object and copy paste in these walls or these windows, right? These window facades, basically. So I'm going to be able to get exactly these circular shapes, automatically, right out of the box. I don't need to manually place each and every one of these buildings with those glass facades. Now, by the way, that leads me to mentioning that I am actually going to do a procedural object tutorial or some kind of a guide video, and I am going to be mentioning this technique in there and explaining it in a bit more detail, so stay tuned for that. It's probably going to be released somewhere in January, maybe February, I'm not sure. But anyway, back to this place. So this area is going to have multiple of these levels. I'm really trying to use networks and some sort of details to make it really easy to do this place, right? So just like with those previous brutalist areas, I'm not really using that many objects. So in the end, I'm just going to use those window facades, and then these outlines. Those are the planters made by Avania, I believe. I also used them in the previous episode. So again, that's tying to that area of tying to that topic of to that point of staying consistent with the details. So those are the planters with the small flowers or bushes, and it's also going to make that area a little bit green. And then I'm just using these kinds of network surfaces because that's the most convenient way of doing these kinds of circular areas. And obviously network multi-tool with the circular tool is going to greatly help me in this place. And putting the nodes where the stairs are so I can cut these shapes, the grass on the top and the pavement on the levels, and doing the terraforming networks to fix those vertical terrain positions. Surface painter on the bottom to make it just pavement on all levels. So overall, in the time lapse, it looks like it was an easy job, but I suppose it wasn't, and I suppose it wasn't mostly because I was not familiar with this technique. If I was to recreate that particular place, it probably would take me, maybe not just a couple of minutes, couple of tens of minutes, but it would be a lot faster. So that's usually how it is, and I'm kind of surprised that still, after some 5 years of playing this game, maybe like three and a half of using procedural objects, I'm still finding these new techniques. So that's kind of surprising, and that's great because there's just something new all the time in City Skylines. So that's really good. Now, I'm done with the circle, but the circle wasn't actually something that I wanted to start with. It was something that was very much necessary to define the geometry of the area, but we need to continue with something slightly different, and we are going to leave the detailing obviously for later. So I definitely knew that I want to continue with this big building block because it was a bit cut, a bit more suddenly, and it needed some sort of continuation. And it needed some kind of continuation that's going to work together with the railway, because the railway cuts through the building. We did that in the previous episode, and it just needs to, somehow leave it, right? So I decided that I'm just going to use this roundabout building once more. But this time, I'm going to change it so that the shape is going to be inverted like this. Because as you can see even from this view, it is going to somewhat continue the shape of that previous building. And then the building on the top is nicely going to sit somewhat like if you imagine the tangents of that particular crossing point on the edge of that building, it's perfectly perpendicular to that. So that's just like playing with some geometry that is always a little bit more interesting in these kinds of places when it's like a uniform geometry that exactly follows these sort of perpendicular principles or something. I'm not really sure how to explain it. It just works, right? Now, all of these holes in these procedural object buildings, basically this procedural object building, I'm just using it for the front facade, for the windows, the balconies, but all the sides, the side walls, I need to fill it in with something slightly different, right? And again, what better shape or what better material than the concrete pillar that I already used many more times before in this place, because again, I try to be consistent. Now, the road. So that building that I did there with that inverse shape also created an interesting opportunity to create maybe the tunnel entrance right on the side of that building, because the road can then somewhat continue that shape of the building and then turn towards the land a little bit more and just continue along these cliffs on the side of the river and just, somewhere else in the city. Later it's probably going to be connected to some sort of a highway system in this direction. Now, I already promised in the previous episode that we are going to do some sort of a road entrance so that these buildings can, have some sort of connection to the roads. Now, I suppose that if this was real life, it's not, okay, so calm down. But if it was, then it probably would be, there would probably be some sort of underground entrances as well to these buildings, especially, for example, that tower, that central tower, and some of those buildings more on the cliffs, more inland. But we are also going to create some sort of surface entrances. So that's exactly going to be, for example, this one. So this building is going to have just like a small dead-end road. I try to make it look a little bit wider, but it's not really intended for parking. Again, I'm thinking that there is some sort of underground parking hidden so that it doesn't take space on the surface. And these are just intended for maybe like emergency vehicles, or I don't know, if you are moving, then you're just going to park your vehicle temporarily in front of the entrance or something like that. It's in City Skylines, I don't really need to care, right? So I'm just doing it more like aesthetically. To be completely honest, that's exactly the reason why I'm using black, like very black looking asphalt in Asturis, because it's just a color that's more contrasty to the rest of these places, right? And we don't really have black color, and we don't really have an excuse of using black color with this particular like shade, right, in any of these areas. So that's exactly why the roads are very important, because they are just going to form these kinds of like outlines to some of these white buildings and all the green surfaces and everything like that. The railway doesn't really work as well for this purpose, because it's this like a brownish color that's not super contrasty to the environment, but the roads are, and I kind of like it. That's exactly the reason why I'm, for example, using those red brick streets that are then twisting up, and those are exactly the same streets that I used a couple of episodes back in that cliff area for exactly that very reason, to just have that different color that's going to kind of highlight the places around it. So yeah, that's it. Now those streets, those red streets. So there's quite a big slope there. The road is going pretty much on the level of the river, and then we need to just make some sort of an entrance, road entrance up there. I mean, we don't really need to, but again, it's just going to be something interesting in that place, and it's pretty much the only road entrance into this area. So why not? And it needs to twist up so that it has some reasonable grade, which is again going to create something interesting, like this twisty road, which is going to be detailed later with some sort of rocks around it and just some trees, and it's just going to look good. So that's the reason. At first I kind of wanted to play a bit more with the terrain. Eventually I decided that this place is going to be flat. It kind of works, I suppose. The other idea was that the road, this brick street, is going to follow some sort of a little valley, maybe. But yeah, maybe I could have done that. But now that I look at it, now that I think of it, but oh well, I didn't. So let's return back to the circle, because we already defined some sort of other geometry so that we have a better idea how to continue with the circle and the rest of the area. Now, it was always clear right from the start that I would not want to have just a circle, but there's going to be some sort of a building that is going to go inside of it. And this building is going to have maybe some like elevators, so that people can use elevators as well as stairs to reach the bottom of this pit and the other levels. And it's going to be like the dominant of this pit area as well. And again, what kind of style are we going to use in here? Well, obviously brutalism and lots of open concrete surfaces, or like bare concrete surfaces on the facades, together with glass, of course. So I'm just really using this pillar to build some sort of a supporting structure, some kind of interesting shape. I was first trying to experiment with some kind of already finished buildings, but nah, I didn't really like any, and I needed to be highly customized. So I would turn it into PO anyway, so might as well just build it from scratch. It's not really going to be that particularly big, so this is going to just fit much better, and it's that exact same concrete surface texture that I'm using everywhere else, so that's going to go nicely with, for example, those railings on the sides or the walls on the sides of the stair entrances, and later some of the residential buildings that we will do. So this is going to be some sort of a, really just like a rectangular building with some sort of a window, just a single floor really, like elevated above this area. So it's going to be standing on these pillars. And some of these pillars are just going to continue above the roof because they can, because why not? It's just going to be something interesting, and it's probably going to be some sort of a shop, or maybe like an office place, or some kind of a community center. I don't know, something like that. This place is all about the amenities, some kind of center of this residential area that I already talked about. But this building is mostly just a decoration. I really wanted to have some sort of a dominant, unique building in this place, because then we are going to do some more repetitive structures. So that's done. This was actually very, very satisfying part to do with these pillars, because I was working with these pillars for the past 3-4 episodes already, maybe even more actually, if we continue, or if we consider even that elevated train station from a couple of episodes back. So I already know what these pillars do, how you can work with them. So doing these kinds of custom buildings is really easy and very satisfying, like I already said like a million times before. Now we are going to do those shops, those block service buildings in this place, and obviously they cannot be resupplied like gameplay wise, because there are no road entrances. So the only road entrance is actually going to be on the side of this unique building, and I created those concrete walls right on the side of this wall, and I'm just going to put some sort of fake looking props or like doors or entrances, and using the building spawn points, I'm going to make sure that each and every one of those commercial blocks inside the pit are going to have the spawn point at that road. So all the resupply vehicles are going to go there. And unfortunately, I kind of broke it because I don't really still understand how the elevation works with the building spawn points. So unfortunately, it is going to be visible in the cinematics that some cars are kind of flying up and down. I just didn't have the patience to figure it out, because there are going to be quite a lot of those buildings, the commercial buildings in that area. So, fiddle with each and every one of them is just something I don't really have the patience for. So it is what it is. Now, for the residential buildings, it was clear that I need to pick a single building, and I just need to build it a couple more times in this area. Again, that's something that we haven't really done. Well, if you don't count the roundabout big building, but it's not really placed that many times. And in this place, we need to have something smaller that's going to be copy-pasted many more times. So it needs to be something fairly ordinary, but at the same time, somewhat unique, and definitely following that brutalist style, because that's the style of the entire area. So I picked this building. This is the building that I actually really tried to find a picture for that I could use for that Altengrad video, the 1960s architecture, because this is actually a building from Lahr city, or I think it's a city, in Germany. And these are some very nice looking brutalist residential buildings from early 1960s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's kind of interesting that they fit, futuristic Asturis, but, I suppose that right out of the box they don't. So that's why I did all these modifications to them, made the roofs green, do the outline, kind of highlight the balconies, for example, and I put this, again, the concrete pillar on the bare facade to just unify it with the rest of the area. And eventually it turned out to be something really ordinary, like I needed to, but at the same time with a big potential to be just copy pasted into the area. And it uses the same texture, so it's, fitting with all the rest of the details that we already established. Right now it's looking a little bit unwelcoming, this area, but I'm going to turn this place into like a jungle, into just a big forest, and you are barely going to see the buildings from the perspective of that central area. So that's actually going to be something different compared to the last time, because the central tower is very much visible from the entire place, and we didn't really go that ham with the trees, but in this place it's going to be very green, and this is pretty much going to be like a very green looking, somewhat low density suburb, but it's not really. It's like a medium density, maybe even high density if you think about it, but because there are going to be a lot of people living in kind of a small area, I suppose, but it definitely could have been a lot more denser, or a lot denser, right? So yeah, I guess it's a medium density place, and it's going to be very green, like I already said. So those are the buildings. I put those cubes inside of them because I converted them into procedural objects, obviously, so they didn't work. And I think I put, in some of these buildings, I put 2 of those residential cubes because I really wanted to have some more population in this particular place. I was not exactly satisfied with the volume of people walking in these, open spaces, using the public transport and all that. So I'm probably going to be fine-tuning the population of this entire district even later. Although with that place from the previous episode, I'm really satisfied with how that turned out and how the people are using all the open spaces and all these pedestrian paths. So that one is fine. This one needs to be a little bit fine-tuned, but we are going to just observe that in the coming weeks, in the coming months, really, because this place is obviously going to be more and busier as we grow the rest of the city. That's pretty much the entire story for the downtown as well, for the main train station, and all the different places all around. So these places obviously needed very heavy infrastructure for the pedestrian path. So as you can see, I connected all the stairs. I even did some connections from the elevators. I made sure that all of these levels, all of these terraces are walkable. Fortunately, the way City Skylines works is that these kinds of block service buildings, they are going to be accessible from these pedestrian paths, and I can already spoil, you are going to see that in a couple of minutes in the cinematics, but people are using all those terraces, all those pedestrian paths, and just walking all around the area, kind of realistically, like very realistically, which is looking just great, right? This is exactly that unloading resupply place that I was talking about. So I just created like some, entrances into that place. And I'm also thinking that there's probably some kind of a big underground garage if people want to have cars. They obviously cannot place them right in front of their buildings because those are just pedestrian paths towards them. But there is going to be like a big garage right next to that pit. And if there is like a need for like an emergency vehicle access, then they obviously, emergency vehicles would be able to theoretically, not in the game of course, but they could be using those pedestrian paths again in some kind of emergency. Now, by the way, I changed trees. I did some kind of, fiddling with some of the trees because I noticed that I really lose a lot of performance when I'm using lots of trees in these places. So I decided to use some of the more low poly trees, and one of those is, for example, the pongum tree. Now that is the big one, the really big tree that you can see in all these shots. The very green, kind of darker green tree that's just filling the volume. It's a very large tree with lots of, I think it's a leaf tree. Yeah, it definitely is. And it's creating this more tropical feel. It is a tropical tree. And I changed it globally for the entire map, even in the downtown. And in the downtown, it forms some sort of like green tunnels in some parks and around some public transport. So that's actually looking really great. And I'm really, really glad for this change. So I am able to not use that many instances of this tree to fill like bigger volumes and create this like more jungly jungly feel. Yeah, I'm using that word a lot, but still, that's exactly what it is. So together with the palms and some kind of lower bushes that I'm also switching for some more low poly versions, then I was able to save like 1 or 2 FPS in this particular area, so it's not that big of a deal, but overall on the map I suppose it's a little bit easier on the performance. In this particular place, I also used, for the first time ever, I suppose, the button to unlock, well, actually lock the forestry area, because otherwise we would have that like more browny ground around this pit. But the pit uses the network for grass, so it would like create like a little border. So we don't have that in that place. Yeah, you can see, for example, here on that bottom surface on the grass, the grass is a bit more brown, but on the top, on the buildings, it's very bright green, right? So that's exactly what I wanted to prevent in that new place, and it's, you know, looking okay. So yeah, we finally have this area done. We have it connected. This building that we are looking at right here is in the center, geometrical center of the place. It's done from both sides. The trains are just working with it, going through the building. We have the road, the tunnel entrance. We have lots of those rocks all around it. And overall, it's just playing with the terrain. It's working with you know, its surroundings and all of that. And we are wrapping it up with this lower density residential area that's very green, as you can see from this shot. And it's just looking okay, you know, it turned out looking fine. This is exactly what I was saying before, that I'm going to open up one side of that pit place so that there is more like an open area. People can just go there, chill there, look at the river, look at the space elevator. There is a great view of the space elevator, the new bridge, and they can just, you know, sit on those tables on the terraces for like a cafe or something, and you know, then go home into some of these houses in the jungle. So anyway, that is going to be all for today's episode of Asturis. We are going to leave this place in the next episode. We are going to return to the downtown, do some colors, do some, you know, more usual expansion of the city center, and we are going to leave this style behind. But anyway, I hope you liked today's Asturis episode. If you did, then please do all the things for the algorithm below the video. And also big thanks to the channel supporters, the channel members. I greatly appreciate your support. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Take care and goodbye.